The story of the raising of Lazarus is really a critical story in John's Gospel. If you read through these uncover little deals here and go right the way through from beginning to end, you'll notice that what happens in the reading we just had, that story is really the middle point of the whole book. Okay, so all the way through, Jesus is being presented and he's kind of revealing who he is. As he goes, he's revealing a little bit of who he is to people in key moments. He turns water into wine. He heals a guy's son. He heals a lame person. He's doing these miracles as he goes. And as you go through it, John, the writer, calls them signs. Like this was the first sign that Jesus did to manifest his glory. And what we've just read, or had read to us, is really, in a sense, almost the ultimate sign. There's 7 signs in John's Gospel, and there's no reference to signs from now on until the end, apart from just one that looks backwards. So this is really the final sign that's described in John's Gospel, the final of 7, but it's number 6. Okay, now you might think I'm completely mad, it must be a Chippenham thing, but it's actually right. This is the number 6th sign, but it's the last one that's presented, which means that the other one, those of you that are discerning have figured this out, the 7th one's already been mentioned. Okay, so it's all been building and building and building, and as you read through the story, you get this feel that actually the tension has been building. From about chapter 5 onwards, there's a tension that's brewing with the religious leaders in Jerusalem. And that's gone on for months. Jesus has done things, he's said things, he's created all sorts of stir in Jerusalem. And this event in John 11 is kind of like the last straw. This is the last thing that just sets them off. From this point on, they are determined that he should die. Okay, so this really is a significant story. The story itself, I think, is quite easy to imagine. If you can kind of try to wrap your heads around Middle East 2,000 years ago, Bethany is this little village. It's just around the corner from Jerusalem on a hillside. I went there a few years ago, and there was a guy there trying to sell slings. You know, like David and Goliath type slings. So you put a stone in, you let it go, and the stone flies off. I thought that was quite funny, because he kept releasing stones that were just flying across the buildings into the distance. And I'd imagine it's like a herd of goats on the other side just getting peppered with this guy's stones. But I'm not quite sure why he was selling slings in Bethany. There was no connection, apart from he was good at it. But when you go there, there's this place that they say, this could have been Lazarus' tomb. We don't know. Obviously, 2,000 years is a lot of history to pass. But there's this stone that kind of covers a grave, a tomb, and you go down a couple of flights of stairs. It's quite weird standing in a tomb, I find. And you're down there, and they say this could be it. And so Jesus came to Bethany quite a lot. He would have come there, he would have stayed there. This family were close friends of his, Mary, Martha, Lazarus. These were people that Jesus hung out with. He enjoyed their company. And so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, you'd think he would rush there. That's what the disciples thought. But he didn't. He held back. And they were kind of going, why? Why aren't you rushing? Lazarus is ill. You love him. Come on, let's get there. And Jesus says, he's asleep. And they go, well, if he's asleep, he'll be fine. No, he's dead. Oh, that's kind of serious. On the ill scale, I find dead is quite serious, right? And so Jesus said he's dead, but it's good, and we're going to sort it. And so they go, and as they get there, it's just kind of like this outpouring of grief. First of all is Martha rushing out to him. Jesus, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. You could have stopped this. You've healed all the other people. You could have stopped this, but you're too late. And then she has this little conversation that we're going to come back to. And then Mary hears, and she rushes out and basically has the same kind of conversation. And then Jesus goes to the tomb, and he shouts, Lazarus come out, and Lazarus comes out. It's quite a simple story. But obviously, if you're there, that's a kind of rock your world story. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you were there, you would have told that story for the rest of your life to everyone that you met. Your grandkids would have got tired of the Lazarus story because like every time they come to your house, it's like, okay, I've made the jam tart or whatever you make for grandkids, and then let me tell you the Lazarus story. They would think, oh, not again, we've heard this a million times. But if you were there, you'd have told it, right? Because there's a man who was dead 4 days, like smelly dead, which is what Martha says later. Like, you open the tomb, it's going to reek. Jesus, don't do that. And Jesus says, open the tomb, and calls him out, and Lazarus walked out of the tomb. It's called the raising of Lazarus. I suppose really it's the resuscitating of Lazarus. It wasn't technically a resurrection because he died again, but even so, a resuscitation after 4 days is impressive. And so when you zero in on that conversation that Jesus was having with Martha, there's this weird thing going on. Okay, he's saying, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, even though he dies, yet he will still live. You know, that phrase, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? And she goes, yes, I do believe it, but she pushes it off into the future. Did you notice that? The comment, the phrasing that she used, let me get it exact here. She said to Jesus, here we go, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. And just before that, she said, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So Jesus has come to her and he's saying, I am the resurrection. If people believe in me, I can give them life. And she's going, yes, 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 I know that. Future. Distant, like off in the future, in that time that no one's experienced yet. I understand from my Old Testament that there is a resurrection and the dead are going to rise, and in that day, yes, I know, but but Jesus, he's dead and I'm sad. And Jesus is trying to reel her into that situation to get her to realize, I'm not talking thousands of years from now, I'm talking today. And she just does not twig. And so Jesus' statement right in the midst of that, if she had known what was going to happen just a few minutes later, she would have been listening to this and blown away by it, don't you think? I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes. But she didn't. And I think the thing about this story that to me just kind of makes it leap off the page is that is exactly the same dynamic that happens now. That is, people encounter Jesus. They hear about Jesus. Maybe they start reading the Gospels. Maybe they hear a presentation or watch a drama. Whatever it is, there's some sense in which people kind of go, I'm intrigued. And then when the offer is made, as in Jesus wants to give you life, Jesus wants you to have a relationship with God, or however it's phrased, we tend to do exactly the same thing that Martha did. And we go, yes, way off in the future, right? We tend to push it off and say, yeah, I believe that if there is a heaven, then it's possible to get there, and if there is one, it's probably nice, and if Jesus is there, he's probably a good chap, and we kind of push it off, and we can end up with a kind of a Christianity offer that is a nice thought, but it's completely disconnected to me living my life today. And that's what Martha felt like. Jesus is talking about resurrection. That's nice, but my brother's dead and my heart is broken. There was no connection for her. The amazing thing is with Jesus that this is the ultimate sign that he did, but this wasn't the ultimate sign, like the final one. The final one, he told the people way back in chapter 2 that you tear down this temple in 3 days, I'm going to build it again. All right, you may have read that, and the people are kind of going, temple? How are you going to do that? It took 46 years to build this temple. But it tells us he was referring to his own body. And so all the way through John's Gospel, there's this anticipation that the ultimate miracle that Jesus was going to do was to die himself, be buried himself, like proper dead, smelly dead, and stand up and walk out of there alive. And so that's still to come. Martha doesn't know that. She doesn't get that. And so she's in this situation where her brother's dead, the tomb is sealed, the smell is strong, and the words of Jesus feel like nice little comforting words. Maybe you've experienced death, a grandparent or a parent or a sibling. It's horrific, it's terrible. And maybe you remember in the midst of that, people coming to you and not knowing what to say. Because what do you say to someone whose dad has just died or whose brother has just died? There's nothing you can say, and yet people say things and you kind of stand there and you kind of go, thank you, but it just doesn't register. And here Jesus is saying, your brother's going to rise again. And she's like, yeah, thank you, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's not registering. And yet she's talking to the person who just 2 months later is going to be buried, and he is going to rise himself and walk out of the tomb. She doesn't get that. And the danger for us is that we can be engaging and interacting with Jesus and think that the whole offer of Christianity is a future thing. Like, yeah, pie in the sky when you die. It'd be nice if it's true. And not realize that actually, when Jesus is getting hold of our hearts, he's serious and he means it. And he's talking about now. And because he has conquered death, when he claims to us to be the resurrection and the life, if you believe in me, even if you die, yet you will live, he's serious. He's not pushing that off. He's not saying, let me give you some nice thoughts so that you can live your life with some vague hope of something in the future. He's saying, no, I want to give you life now. And that's the thing for the past 2,000 years that I think has really set apart Christians. People who are genuinely transformed by meeting Jesus. They know that we have life now. It's not just a future hope or an insurance policy. It's right now, I meet Jesus and he gives me life. Where I didn't even realize I was dead spiritually, that I was living my life and it just was empty and hollow and there was nothing there. And then you meet Jesus and he says, I want to give you life. And you accept that. He gives you life now. Where suddenly you're alive to God and you're alive to life and alive to people and alive to hope and alive to all these different realities. And you have a heavenly Father that you know is your Father, that's his Father, and you can talk to Jesus and suddenly, and it's vivid and it's real and it's now. And then when we die, we get to go be with him. There is hope for the future. But let's not make the mistake Martha understandably made. That when we think about Jesus, we think it's all future and there's nothing now. She was encountering someone who loved, someone who wept. When he saw the tears and he heard the grieving that was going on, Jesus wept. It tells us that in verse 35. And she saw that. This isn't some kind of, distant, disconnected God kind of man who's walking around like nothing matters. No, he's feeling it. He's feeling their hurt. He's feeling their pain. He's right there with them. He wants to embrace and care and comfort. But ultimately, he does that by bringing Lazarus back. And so I suppose the challenge for us, here we are at the end of a term, right? We're about to get an Easter break. We're about to have Easter and all the kind of chocolate and bunny rabbits and everything somehow is supposed to make us think of Jesus. It doesn't. But you know what I mean? It should make us think of Jesus. We think about Jesus dying on the cross, that he chose to go there. This is the moment where that was determined. All right, if you kept reading after the bit that we read, there's this bit, one of my favorite verses in John, where the leaders in Jerusalem go, we've got to get rid of this Jesus. He's causing too much trouble. Let's kill him. And then someone's like, yeah, but he just raised Lazarus from the dead. Well, let's kill Lazarus too. And, committee kind of decision. Like, they're like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's kill Lazarus. It's brilliant. It's like chapter 12, verse 10. So they agree to kill Lazarus. They agree to kill Jesus. Why? Because he is causing too much trouble. That's when they determine it. But Jesus determined it long before. He came to this world to go to the cross to die. And death was never meant to keep hold of him. On the third day he rose again, which means he's conquered death, conquered sin, conquered all of that stuff. And he lives today and meets us. Isn't that amazing? He comes to us by his Spirit. And you may have sensed this, where you feel like a tap on the shoulder of your heart. That's weird, but you feel like this little tap on your shoulder, and it's like, hey, God loves you, God's real. And you're going, oh, I never believed this stuff. But suddenly you're feeling drawn to it. You're finding Jesus fascinating, where before he would have been just a swear word. And suddenly you're kind of, hang on, is he real? Jesus, are you there? And there's this thing going on, and you're experiencing what Martha experienced. You're experiencing, in the midst of death, encounter with Christ. And he says to us what he said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Trust me. And even though your body may die, you will live again. But even though it's future resurrection, you can be made alive right now. And so as we go into this Easter break, let's have that in our minds. Let's think about that. That that maybe if Jesus is real, and if Jesus rose from the dead 2,000 years ago, then maybe he wants to encounter me in 2016. Maybe he wants to meet me, and he wants to draw me to have the life that I was created for, but I've never managed to find on my own. And then maybe this Easter, as we go through Easter, you have your break, you got your plans or whatever, maybe God's going to work things out for you to make you realize, I am pursuing you, I do love you, and I do want to give you life. And maybe then you'll go, oh, hang on, what was that about John 11 again? You come back and look at it and realize I'm having a Martha moment. I'm encountering, in the midst of death, in the midst of emptiness, I'm encountering the only person who could claim to be the resurrection and the life, and then a few weeks later prove it by rising from the dead. Here's what I'd suggest we do in terms of our thinking discussion. I'm going to hand back to Tom in a second, but here's a couple of kind of prompts for us. Try to imagine what it was like back then. What would you have felt if you were there, if it was your brother that was dead? What would you have felt if you had seen someone who was absolutely 4 days very smelly dead walk out of a tomb very much alive? What kind of impact would that have? But then also think about today. In what way is today a bit like that day? In what way is my life a little bit like Martha, where I can encounter Jesus and I can totally miss what he's saying? That he wants to do something in me right now, and I can assume it's just way off in the future. So think about back then, but make sure you think about now as well. That moment where Jesus comes to us and gives himself to us and offers to us life. Not just physical life forever, but spiritual life right now.